For a bit of context, this actually happened to one of my friend's mothers at the time of this story. My friend at the time, we'll call her by the name Georgie, and while Georgiana, or Georgie, G, was with her mother on the highway one night. Obviously, the roads were getting bad, so she was taking a deserted road, which means she was taking one of the back roads while her mother was with her. They were coming back from being out of town for a few days as they were visiting Georgie's parents. Well, grandparents, actually. So they were pretty much had to drive through the winter during a bad snowstorm, which thankfully they got there safely. However, it was time for them to head home. It was late at night. With them being so in the back roads, there was barely any light shown. There was only a few street posts, but not very much. That's when something was going wrong with Georgie's phone, as she had no signal, so she couldn't text her parents. Well, I mean, she couldn't text her dad and let him know when they were coming home. So, a bit further ahead, her mother stopped as she needed to take a piss. So she pulled the car over to the other side and went to do her business. While Georgie's mom was doing that, Georgie was on her phone, pretty much playing a game that you don't need Wi Fi for, when she ended up looking up to see that there was a person. Now, at first, she thought that it could have been maybe just someone walking or hitchhiking along the back road. He seemed to be wearing a hoodie with cargo pants, and she couldn't see the facial features of this man, but he was standing there looking really weirdly. Now, at first, Georgie thought that maybe he was just on drugs or something, but it wasn't until he started walking over towards their car. When Georgie's mom got back, she ended up seeing the man. And of course, the man turns around and runs back in the other direction. Now, this was confusing since they never seen anyone like that, and what was this guy's intentions were was definitely unknown. Was this guy looking into robbing them, kidnapping them, or do God knows what? But they never went down that back road for a while at night. They're still not sure as to who this guy was or what his intentions were, but if they had to guess, his intentions were most likely not good at all. This was the only time that they ended up having something bad. Had not really so bad to make you jump out of your seat scary, but it's definitely one that they really end up there. So Georgie at times when driving, she gets a little paranoid thinking that man might come back for them, but nothing like that has ever happened since then during the winter. And it's always good to be cautious of your surroundings. You don't know who or what is going to pop out of nowhere. So, for a bit of context, this actually happened to one of my friends at the time of this story. This was about maybe 5 years ago, and this is definitely one story that really sticks to them. Now, my friends were from Barrie at the time, and from then on, this would definitely happen to one of them. Now, one of my friends at the time, I am going to say her name as Chelsea. Chelsea was driving down a road sometime late at night. For an example, it was around the Christmas break, and she was going to see her cousin's side of the family, which of course she went there with her parents for what seemed to be a few days. Now, it was just sometime after Christmas, and Chelsea was on her way home. While she was driving, though, she ended up looking to see that there was a child on the road. That's when she pulls over and walks over to the child, asking if it needed help, but this child seemed to run off. It was just weird of how this child ran off. So she goes back in her car and she drives continuously throughout the forested highway when she sees that same kid again. It was strange seeing that this kid was somewhat there. She ended up getting out of her car and ended up approaching the kid again, but this time he took off. Now Chelsea was starting to get a little annoyed. Wasn't sure if this child was just playing or if it was just something else. She ended up trying to call her boyfriend and ask what she should do, and her boyfriend suggested that to go to the police. That's when she says that she would go to the police station and report the missing child on the road. While she was driving down the road, she ended up pressing on her brakes so hard when she saw the child right in the middle of the road, letting out an "oh shit." As soon as she stopped her car, she got out and looked over to see if she hit anything. However, there was no roadkill on the road, so that child could have escaped somehow. But how was that possible with an oncoming car? She ends up looking around thinking that the child could have been ran into the forest, but she couldn't seem to find him. That's when she goes to town, and when she got back there, she reported it to the police. The police had said that they would search the area, so Chelsea kept going down that road to see her cousins a couple times. Well, during the winter, though, she never really saw that child again, and the police couldn't even find any traces of this child. So I think what she experienced that day was completely paranormal. When one of my teachers at the time used to do hunting, her name was Cindy, and she really loved hunting. She had been hunting for many years, and she usually does it with her sons or sometimes her husband. A few times she had done hunting with friends, but since her friends were her kids were in college and her friends were busy and she didn't have work, so she decided to go out hunting alone. Now she had been hunting alone for a few years and never had once had anything scary or anything bad happening. But once this story comes into play, it's a whole different level for her. Now Sydney was pretty much just chilling and relaxing and doing his own thing while she was walking around the forest, and it happened to be late at night. It was starting to get dark and the sun was starting to set, meaning that nighttime was falling and more creatures were coming out in the night to hunt. Sydney at first didn't think any much of it and started walking back the way she came, when all of a sudden she looked to see that there was a rabbit. She obviously pointed her gun at the rabbit, about to take the shot, when all of a sudden something spooks the rabbit. She obviously thought that maybe the rabbit saw her, but the rabbit didn't see her, and why it ran off was definitely a question. She ends up looking around, hearing what seems to be like big thuds. Now at first she thought that it could have been a bear in the area, and she looked around thinking that she would see the bear, but since it was too dark out, with the exception of the glow of the moon, she couldn't really seem to find anyone, or in this case she can't seem to find anything around. But what she saw just made her stood completely still. Whatever it was definitely had glowing eyes, and it was looking directly at her. Now, Sydney had thought that it could have been a bear, but there was no really telling if it was really a bear. So with that, she turned around and started walking away. However, maybe about 15 minutes later, as she was getting closer to her truck, she ended up turning around, hearing footprints in the snow. She ended up looking, thinking somebody might be behind her, but she didn't see anything. About maybe 20 feet from her was what appeared to be a really weird creature. It was big and hunched over a bit, and it had what seemed to be a head of a deer, but in a skull form. Now, she wasn't so sure as to what this creature was, so she ended up taking the gun and waited to see if he would charge at her. She ended up taking the shot at whatever it was, but that creature let out a roar as it did no effect. and then turned around and ran off in the other direction. Now, Sydney went back to her car, and when she got home, she ended up telling her husband about what she saw and stuff like that. It was really creepy, to say the least, of what this creature was. However, she was convinced that that was no bear at all. It was definitely a really strange creature. Whatever this creature was, she doesn't even want to know what it was, but it definitely was a creature that pretty much was around the forest, and she had never went hunting by herself for a while. We don't really know what lies out there in the darkness, and that's definitely something we don't know and are not sure of. Now, Sydney is not even sure what this person really was or what it was doing, but whatever that creature was definitely no animal. She wasn't sure if it was a person pulling a prank or if it was actually a real creature. That really frightens her to this day, and she even kind of wonders about what it is. And she wasn't even sure as to who it was, but it definitely was one creature that she's never seen in person. She's seen other strange things in the forest while hunting, but nothing ever like this. She's never seen that creature like that ever again, and she hopes she doesn't ever run into it.